The sudden collapse in Afghanistan is harming the mental health of veterans who served in the region. According to USA Today, the failure in the region has led to feelings of hopelessness and frustration among veterans. New York congressional candidate Brittany Ramos DeBarros was deployed in 2012. She called the way that the withdrawal has been orchestrated, quote, disappointing to say the least. She joins us now to discuss. Welcome to the show, Brittany. So you addressed how veterans are being neglected in your official campaign announcement. So we're actually going to take a listen to this.
This island has been my home since I came back from war, only to find my fellow veterans and community members struggling and dying on the streets. I began to ask why we always have money for war, but not to take care of the people sent to fight them, or the people we're supposedly fighting for.
These wars are immoral! Profiting off of killing is immoral! It is time to stand up, and we won't be silent anymore.
Brittany, thank you so much for joining us. With what we're seeing right now in the news, how do you think this is? What specifically do you think is impacting veterans the most, and how?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I think that often there's this really shallow narrative that I don't know, that veterans are just sad that the withdrawal, that we didn't accomplish anything. For me, it's deeper than that. For me, it was deploying, believing that I was going to help the Afghan people, that I was going to fight for democracy and freedom and all these beautiful things that we're told that America is supposed to be about, and being on the ground and seeing rampant corruption, seeing a complete lack of accountability in command cultures, seeing corporations running the show, and seeing so obviously that we were doing much more harm than good to the Afghan people. Only to come home, struggle, get on my feet, receive, good care, but care that was very obviously underfunded by a VA whose budget had been gutted repeatedly over the course of decades, despite multiple troop surges during that time. And to realize that those corporations had continued to make money off of that war. All culminating in, for me, in 2019, when the Afghanistan papers were published with black and white evidence that our elected officials and senior military leaders had been knowingly lying to the troops, to military families, to the American public, and frankly, to the world. I think that in a climate like that, you are asked what your sacrifice was in service to. And I think that we have to keep asking those questions. And it's one of the reasons I'm running for Congress in New York 11 today, is because I don't think that the truth should be a difficult thing to expect from either party. And that a kind of real loyalty to the values that we say we believe in shouldn't be such an anomaly to find amongst our elected officials.
I think that's a very good point that you make. Let me ask you, because in your launch ad, which I think was very powerful, you talked about giving the care that's needed to veterans. So we nearly quadrupled the number of veterans we have in the wars between Iraq and Afghanistan over the last 20 years. And administration after administration, the Obama administration, the Trump administration, tinkered around the edges of reform on VA healthcare choice the VA healthcare system. What would you propose? What's your platform, and how we could improve the way in which we care for veterans once they return to society and come back from these engagements?
Well, first and foremost, we can not send service members to wars that they're going to experience catastrophic moral injury in, right? When leaders decide that we are going to send our troops to potentially kill and die in a place, anywhere, we need to know, it should be the least that we can expect to know that that is going to be a truly just cause, and that there's going to be responsible leadership that is guiding the decision making. And the reality is that hasn't been the case, and we need serious reforms that get corporate influence out of those decisions to be able to trust that those decisions are being made for sound and just reasons. A lot of folks don't realize that almost half of the military budget goes to corporations. It has not always been that way. And I think that we really need to address that at a systemic level. When you look at the fact that those corporations donate to the campaigns of almost 90% of the members of Congress. Beyond that, I think we need to fully fund the VA. And more importantly, we need to fully fund healthcare for everyone. That is good for veterans. That is good for the troops. And it's something that we absolutely could afford if we were, if we had leaders that were making decisions based on moral priorities that really center justice and human life.
So, Brittany, you're running for Congress in a very veteran-heavy district. What are you hearing on the ground about Joe Biden's decision to withdraw?
Absolutely. Well, I'm not just running in a veteran-heavy district. I've spent the last several years of my life organizing post 9/11 veterans full-time across the country. And what I know is that sometimes well-meaning civilian communities, political communities believe that what we want is an empty pat on the back, thank you for your service, parade, veteran discount. What most of us want is competent leadership and the benefits that we were told that we would be entitled to. And, these wars are sold either for they're sold two ways. Either for the benefit of people overseas, like the Afghan people, and yet what we've seen is in the so-called global war on terror, in almost every place that we've bombed or invaded as part of those, wildly proliferated operations, the State Department's count of the number of so-called terrorist recruitment, organization, et cetera, by our own measures has multiplied from pre-2001 levels. And so that argument, right, it doesn't hold up. The other way that it's sold is that it's that we can't confront these wars, that we can't criticize them because that's anti-troop. That's, it's bad for the troops. And yet, I've already spoken to the reality that so often, we get this fanfare when we're on our way out the door, and then you see a refusal to really deeply address the systemic issues, whether those are gender discrimination issues, whether those are economic injustices, racial injustices, environmental destruction. Veterans are a category of people that are going to be deeply impacted by each of those issues at the intersections, just like everybody else is, but in many ways, in more layered and pronounced ways. And so, what I see is sometimes this outrage that someone like me would say that I tweeted, I'm sorry, I participated in this, and that's because I didn't help. I didn't serve. I didn't promote democracy and freedom the way that I believed that my leaders were sending me to do that. And that is devastating. That's devastating to live with. That's devastating to confront. And I think we need the rest of, civilian, political, social circles to understand and listen deeply when people like me say that, because that attitude is the majority in the veteran and military community. People may fall in different political alignments and categories, but, recent Data for Progress polling shows that even with the way, the very frustrating and disappointing way that this withdrawal has been handled, the vast majority of veterans and military community still, align with some of these ideas that we never should have invaded in the first place, that we haven't helped, and that now our priority needs to be saving lives and doing what needs to be done in order to move forward in a way that, it does right by the Afghan and the American people.
Brittany for president, man.
No, wonderfully said, Brittany, and we really appreciate you joining us. We hope you'll join us again soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Brittany.
And more Rising next.